You mop the same hallway every night at 11 p.m., and nobody in this building has any idea you're worth $3.2 million. Not the teachers who say goodnight without really looking at you. Not the principal who's forgotten your name twice this year alone. Not your own daughter, who thinks you work nights out of necessity, because that's what you've let her believe for 11 years. You push the mop bucket past the trophy case, past the photos of Student of the Month winners, past the framed newspaper clipping about the football team's championship season, and none of it means anything close to what's sitting quietly in an account nobody's ever asked you about. It didn't start with a plan. It started with a $19,000 salary in your first year as a janitor at 26, and a decision that felt almost too small to matter at the time. You'd just come off 2 years of unemployment after a factory closed, and the janitor job felt like solid ground after nothing but uncertainty. You didn't celebrate the offer. You just did what your father did his whole life without ever explaining why, which was live on less than you made and never once talk about it. Rent was $480 a month for a one-bedroom apartment near the school, the kind of place nobody would guess belonged to someone building anything. You kept it that way for 6 years, not because you couldn't afford more, but because more never occurred to you as something worth spending on. The car was a 1998 Buick you bought used for $2,200 cash, and you drove it for 14 years until the transmission finally gave out, at which point you paid cash again for a slightly newer used Buick because that's what you understood a car to be, not a statement, a tool that starts in the morning. Your union contract came with a modest pension and something else almost nobody in the building ever mentioned, a 457 deferred compensation plan, the public sector equivalent of a 401k, sitting in an enrollment packet most new hires threw away without reading past the first page. You read the whole thing on a Sunday afternoon at your kitchen table, twice, because something about a sentence describing tax-deferred growth stuck with you even though you didn't fully understand it yet. You called the number on the back of the packet on Monday during your lunch break and enrolled at 8% of your paycheck before you'd even finished your first cup of coffee that day. Nobody at the school ever mentioned retirement accounts to each other. It wasn't a taboo subject exactly. It just never came up. The same way nobody discussed their medical history at the water fountain. You didn't bring it up either. You went to work, you mopped the hallways, you fixed the jammed locker doors, you replaced the flickering fluorescent tube in room 2144 different times over 9 years, and twice a month. Automatically, before you ever saw the money in your checking account, a chunk of your paycheck moved into that 457 plan and bought shares in a low-cost index fund nobody in the building had ever heard of. Your daughter was born when you were 29. Her mother left 3 years later, and you raised her mostly alone on a janitor's salary that never once felt like enough in the moment, month to month, bill to bill. You remember specific years where the car insurance payment and a school field trip fee landed in the same week, and you genuinely didn't know how both would get covered. You covered them. You always covered them. Sometimes by picking up overtime shifts nobody else wanted, cleaning up after late basketball games or graduation ceremonies for an extra $40 here, $60 there. None of that overtime money ever went toward anything visible. It went into the same account, automatically, the same week it arrived. By the time your daughter started high school, you were 43, and the 457 balance had crossed $210,000. You never told her. You never told anyone. Your brother once asked, half joking at a Thanksgiving dinner, if you were doing okay financially, gesturing at your same 14-year-old Buick parked in the driveway next to his newer truck. You told him you were fine. You didn't elaborate because there was nothing useful that elaboration would accomplish at a Thanksgiving table, and because the number wouldn't have made sense to anyone measuring your life by the car in the driveway. The market dropped hard in 2008, and your balance, which had climbed to $240,000 by then, fell by nearly a third in a matter of months. You didn't check it daily the way some coworkers checked their own smaller accounts obsessively, panicking over every headline. You kept contributing the same 8%, the same 2 paychecks a month, because stopping had never once occurred to you as an option worth considering. 3 years later, the balance had not only recovered, it had grown past where it started, the way markets do for people who don't interrupt them out of fear. You turned 55 the same year your daughter graduated college, the first person in your family to do so, with a business degree and $22,000 in student loans you quietly paid off within 18 months in cash without ever telling her where the money came from. She assumed you had taken on extra shifts, which wasn't entirely wrong, just wasn't the whole truth either. She still doesn't know to this day that the loan payoff came from an account she's never once heard you mention. At 60, the balance crossed $1.1 million, 5 years before you'd even planned to check in earnest. You remember the exact night you saw the number sitting at the same kitchen table where you'd first read that enrollment packet decades earlier, and feeling something that wasn't excitement exactly. It was closer to a quiet confirmation, the same feeling you get when a locker door that's been sticking for months finally clicks shut properly after you adjust the hinge. Not a celebration, just a system working the way it was built to work. Your coworker Ray, who started the same year you did and made the same salary your whole career, retired at 62 with nothing beyond his pension, because he'd opted out of the 457 plan back when you both enrolled, telling you at the time that he needed every dollar of his paycheck and couldn't afford to lock any of it away. He wasn't wrong about needing the money in the moment. He was wrong about what locking it away would have actually cost him. Ray works part-time now at a hardware store 3 days a week because his pension alone doesn't stretch the way he'd hoped it would. You've never once brought up the difference between your accounts. There's no version of that conversation that helps either of you. You're 67 now, still working 2 nights a week at the school because you genuinely like the quiet of an empty building at 11 p.m., not because you need the paycheck. Your 457 balance, rolled into a low-cost IRA at retirement, sits at $3.2 million. Your daughter, now 38 with 2 kids of her own, still thinks you work because you have to. You haven't corrected her, not out of secrecy exactly, but because the number would change how she sees every year of your life leading up to this one, and you're not entirely sure that's a trade worth making yet. Last month, the school board discussed budget cuts, including whether to keep night custodial staff on payroll or contract the work out to a cheaper outside company. You sat in the back of that meeting, unnoticed as always, listening to people discuss your position as a line item, a cost to be minimized, a number on a spreadsheet with your name nowhere near it. Nobody in that room had any idea that the person they were quietly discussing eliminating was worth more than most of the board members combined. You didn't say anything. There was nothing useful that saying anything would accomplish. You still pushed the same mop bucket past the same trophy case most nights. The fluorescent light in room 214 finally got replaced permanently last spring, which felt in its own small way like the end of a very long chapter. Nobody claps for that either. Nobody claps for any of it, the same way nobody clapped 41 years ago when a 26-year-old with a $19,000 salary decided, without telling anyone, to live on less than he made and let the difference disappear quietly into an account most of his coworkers never bothered reading the enrollment packet for. The mop bucket squeaks the same way it always has. The hallway is empty the same way it always is at 11 p.m. And somewhere in an account nobody at this school has ever asked about, $3.2 million sits quietly, doing exactly what it was built to do, whether anyone in this building ever notices or not. Or